BookTube. Welcome to part 2, shelves 3 and 4. As we're going down, I've put the Browning back and the British poets back, and there's a bit of space there because I'm excuse me, I'm going to do a slight rearranging because there's really not a lot of rhyme or reason to my poetry collection at the moment. It sort of had a lot, when I put the bookshelves up, they just sort of went up. A lot of them for size, as you can see here, they like I put them because I had a shorter shelf, and I just put the smaller books together, irrespective of what in period. And then as it continued down further, it was sort of almost as and when I got books. They just sort of went on the shelf. And then occasionally when I got a lot of one author, then I put those together. But other than that, not a lot of organization, which I do want to get to at some point, but I still don't have enough space to do that because I want to leave space because I want to have a good sort of representative library of poetry. And I pick up anything that I see that if I see a volume of poetry for £1 or two, or 50p, especially £1, and if it's in good shape, I grab it, even if I've never heard of the author. I try to find anything I can from sort of the first 30 years of the 20th century, because I've got some things that are just like, one person put out a slim volume of poetry. That's all they ever did, but it's interesting stuff, but nobody's heard of them. So I find that very interesting. But anyway, let's get back to the books. And now it'll be shelf 3. And it's a number of things. This one here, again, this is ones of the ones that I would have paid probably 50p for. It's the Poetry and Prose of William Blake, which is fine. And it's edited by Geoffrey Keynes, complete in one volume, 1941, the Nonesuch Press, London. And it's got a lot of smaller, you can see hear the cracking of the spine. It's got a few illustrations in. Printing is fairly small, but it's everything of Blake. Until I can get, a better edition, this suffices. And I've perused a few of or quite a few actually. I haven't read it from cover to cover, but again, it's one of those that I peruse, or like most of them I peruse, and I'll read bits and pieces while I'm writing. This is kind of neat. Yeah, this was £1. It's poems by Boris Pasternak. And as you can see, there's some Russian at the top. It says Peter Russell. It's got a dust jacket. And there's the naked one, the book. It says Literary Miscellany, Russian Poetry Series 1. And that's on the front free end paper. Russian Poet Series, there's titles in preparation. So this might have been the very first one or very close to it. Peter Russell, Fairwhip, Sussex, 19... 1959, actually. Yeah, it's 1959. Sorry, it took me a minute to figure that. Translated by L. Slater, forward by Hugh McDermott. So, good names. It's just kind of neat. And it's got a interesting smell to it, too. It's the paper. It's got a Russian smell, maybe. Well, it does, actually, because for some reason there is some... Depends on where this was printed. No, it was Sutton. It was printed in London, but I do notice that certain books, depending on where they were printed, will have a similar smell. It's true. and ones that are like the Progress publishers of the Russian ones. That's what I was thinking of. They all have a distinct smell to them because I think it's the type of paper or the ink that was used. I've never gone into it, I've never looked at it, but I've just noticed that they have a distinct smell. This is, 1958 and 59. First published November 1958. Reprinted with revisions and additional poems January 1959. So I was quite thrilled to get this because it's in really good shape. It's quite interesting. Let's see here. Here's another one, like a nondescript little book. It's without the jacket. If it probably did have a jacket. It's got a paper. It's the paper title is peeling off, so you can't even read the title on the back. And this was £1. It's Lyrics from the Chinese by Helen Waddell, Constable and Company, London, 7th printing, 1935. And it's dedicated to her father. It's an introduction. That's kind of the introduction. It is by candlelight one enters Babylon, and all roads lead to Babylon, provided it is by candlelight one journeys. It was by candlelight that John Milton and Diodorus Siculus, and by the third book he had voyaged beyond the Cape of Hope, and now was past Mozambique, and already felt freshly blowing on his face Sabaean odors from the spicy shores of Arabia the Blast. It was by candlelight that the sea coast of Bohemia was discovered, and the finding of it made a winter's tale. Baghdad is not a city to be seen by day. Candlelight is the only illumination for all Arabian Nights. I remember reading that, and for £1 I would have picked this up regardless, but that really did it for me. And the poetry is kind of interesting. It's stuff written. It's just lyrics from Chinese. Don't know how well it's translated, but it rings true. It's quite good. But yeah, it's again a little oddity that I will not pass up. This one here, Dublin Days, L.A.G. Strong. This is pretty rough, but I think that was £1 or less. By L.A.G. Strong, Bonnie and Liverite, publishers, New York, 1923. Again, the 20s that I definitely will grab. Dublin Days and Three Little Songs. And if I start reading poetry, then we'll be here forever, and we'll never even get one shelf done. But yeah, as I say, that was again a no-brainer to buy. My Home and Other Poems, Simple Verses by Emmy Osborne, 2 shillings net. And it's bought by someone here in Bedford, Emmy Jarvis. Just around the corner here. It's literally, it was owned by someone just around the corner from where I live, 1936. That's interesting. It's London, Arthur H. Stockwell Limited, Ludgate Hill. There's no date that I could see here. Yeah. But yeah, obviously it's 30. The newest will be 1936, but it's probably early 30s. Yeah, it's interesting because it's a stapled pamphlet almost. Because it is stapled by the looks of it, or is it sewn? I thought it was stapled. No, it might actually be sewn. Yeah, it is sewn. but it almost as if it's been hand bound. It's paper covered boards. There's nothing remarkable about it, but it's just, again, something you don't see many of. Some Odds and Ends in Rhyme for Friends by C.J. Maltby. The title page doesn't give much away there. Dates. No date. The County Press. Oh, it was printed here in Bedford, actually. It's got some Christmas poems. That actually is a scene actually of Bedford and St. Paul's Church and the bridge. So yeah, so this is a local poet. Songs at Eventide by Eric Dines. Yeah, I always get that backward. Oh, is that upside down now? Yeah, no, that's right. It's got October 31st. Is that 1913? Oh, it's signed by the author. I didn't notice that. It's got an original price of £10, but I know I didn't pay that for it. But that's by Eric Dines to someone. 1912, so yeah, so it is 1913. It says author of lyrics of Gwen and other poems. No, it's published here in Bedford as well. So this is another local poet, which I sort of remember getting, but not sort of remembering fully. I should keep those aside, actually. Yeah, I'll keep those aside before I put them back up on the shelf. Through the White Gate. It's sort of tarnished on the spine. Again, £1. Given by Aunt Charlotte to Henry. No date, though. It's oh, that could be the author, Aunt Charlotte, because it's Verses for My Grandchildren by Charlotte Ogilvie, primitive for private circulation. Again, this is local Bedford. We're not going to see much of this stuff anywhere else. And I'm sure there's towns and villages all over England and the world that are like that. Yeah, I'm just going to, because I'm getting too many there that are local interest sort of stuff. This is poems by Robert Louis Stevenson. It's Underwood's Ballads, Songs of Travel, and Child Garden of Verses. And I have a few of those actually in separate volumes around. This is published by Chatto Windus, association with Longman's Green, in 1923. Yeah, I think it was 1923. Just nicely laid out, nicely. And I like the paper. Paper feels really nice. It's textured. So that was quite nice. Here's another one of those, like the Blake, the Nonesuch Press. It's got to be. I'm sure it is. It must be. This is 1929. Nonesuch Press. Well, it says 1949 originally. This is John Donne, Complete Poetry and Selected Prose, edited by John Hayward. Hayward. Again, these are poorly well, not poorly, but they're cheap editions. The paper's not the best. The printing's better on this one, but the spines, I always find these with faded spines. But again, I probably bought that before I bought other ones of John Donne, and that would have been the first one that I would have had, but at the moment I'm keeping them. Someday I will have to cull, I'm sure, the poetry and get rid of duplicates and so forth, because I do have duplicates occasionally when I'm picking them up for 25p, 50p. This is Pomegranates, or Bells and Pomegranates, second series by Robert Browning. And that's what the brown set is up there. But again, this is just too nice to not keep. It's 19th Century Classics, edited by Clement K. Shorter. Bells and Pomegranates. And that's volume. That's the half-title page. And there's Browning again in his younger days. Yeah, it's the Ward and Locke Company, 1890, eight, 97, I think it's 1897. Yeah. And it's just too nice to not keep this one, even though I'm sure it's in all that up there. Coventry Patmore's poems. A inscription from May 4th, I think it is, 1907. George Bell and Sons, 1906 is the publishing date. Then there's date, and there's Coventry Patmore. Again, another poet I've never heard of until I picked this up. It's with an introduction by Basil Champneys, 1906, as I said, and lots of poetry. Fairly large. It's 436 pages. There's a blind stamp of a bookseller on here on the, if I can see it, it's very small. Can't make it out. But it's a little blind stamp where instead of a little sticker that would show up, Amy at the Dusty Bookshelf showed one there from what was it? It was an Ottawa bookseller, I think, or was it Montreal? But yeah, they used to use a little sticker in places, sometimes in the back, sometimes in front. But this one has a little blind stamp, which is the place of it. This is Poetical Works of George Crabbe. It's the Oxford edition, edited by A.J. Carlyle and R.M. Carlyle. Don't know if there's any relation. But the A could be Alexander Carlyle, but it's too late, I think. Oxford edition, 1908. It's on India paper. Yeah, it's just poet. And it's a thin book, but it is 600 pages long. And that's India paper for you. And gold surround. It's a bit spotted on the back, on the buckram, but it's a nice blue buckram. Here's Medieval Latin Lyrics by Helen Waddell. We saw her before with the Chinese one. I'm sure that's her. Yeah, Helen Waddell. So she translated Chinese and medieval Latin. Again, this was £1. Christmas, Margaret Osborne. I thought that name came up somewhere on one of the poems or something I saw somewhere. A poet. These are all things that I do want to look into. It's author of Wandering Scholars. It's London Constable. It's 4th edition, reprinted in 1935, originally 1929. And it is Latin, medieval Latin poetry with the Latin on the left side and the translation on the right, as per usual. Manuscript of St. Augustine at Canterbury. Verses, translations from Greek and Latin by Arthur D. Innes. Nice sort of buckram with nice decorated spine. Sadly, somebody has cut out the front free-end paper. It probably had a dedication or somebody's name on it, and I don't mind that, and I wish they would have left it. See, this one was like £2. 1894. Verse translation from Greek and Latin poets, chiefly of passages chosen for translation at sight, rendered by Arthur D. Innes, M.A., sometime scholar of Oriel College, Oxford. Looks like it's privately published because it's London A.D. Innes and Company. So he was a publisher as well as So again, these are a lot of this stuff is I don't think you can find it that readily, and that's why I say that's why I grab it immediately once I see this stuff for a few pounds. There's usual Greek and then the translation. Another sort of verse translation from Lucretius by Charles Foxley, M.A. It's Cambridge. It's got the dust jacket, a bit tarnished, and with the translator's compliments, Charles Foxley. And it was owned by someone in Bolton and Marjorie Bird, November 6, 1933. Cambridge, 1933. Translated by Charles Foxley, former scholar of St. John's College, Cambridge. And title page has a poem by, or a stanza from or two, from Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And no Latin, just the translations. This is Robert Henryson, Poems and Fables. And if I remember right, he's Scottish, and this is in Scottish dialect in some ways. It's Poems and Fables of Robert Henryson, schoolmaster of Dunfermline, edited from the earliest manuscripts and printed texts by H. Harvey Wood, Oliver and Boyd, Edinburgh, 1933. And it takes a while to get into reading. It's a little difficult. I forget what period. Is it like 1500s or 1600s? I'm trying to remember now when he was writing. 15. No. So for at least 1500s, I think. Early 1500s by the looks of it. So there's not, and we've seen these before. I'll do them quickly. The epitaphs from Oxfordshire, and then the 3-volume Kanzick's Epitaphs of Middlesex, the 3 volumes. And here's a couple interesting things. So it looks like we won't get to volume the 4th shelf. This here is a privately printed collection of poetry for a young girl, Lettice Hay Shaw. She was born on January 27th, 1887 and died on June 4th, 1904. And there's a photograph of her. And it's been tipped in. It's an actual photograph. And facsimile of her signature. But she was, this is her poetry. It was printed privately by her family, and it's to friends, so it's very limited, and this is her poetry. And she was a local Bedford young lady who died in 1904. I don't think there's any information so much, but there's a few letters by her in the back as well. It's not the greatest poetry, but it's something that I really like. It's very interesting. And here's another one that's very similar, but it's somebody else, and I've yet to been able to locate this fully. It's Elijah and Other Poems by W.A.H. It's just initials, 1899. And it is, again, it's all religious poetry, basically. It's on really nice sort of handmade paper, like you can feel handmade paper. And it, again, it's posthumously published by this young man who died. And it is written in an A.G.A. Hodges, February 1st, 1910, Long Lane. Now, I've done some a little bit. See, it says privately printed at Long Lane near Derby, 1899. And the February 1st, 1910, Long Lane. So chances are, the Hodges, his surname was Hodges, W-A-H. And this would have been extremely limited, probably to just family. So, yeah, it's just very interesting things. That was an interesting shelf, and there's, that was probably it's more interesting than the next shelf's going to be, I think, but who knows? It depends on what your interests are. But, yeah, I'll be back as soon. If this loads up really quickly, I'll be back with the third shelf. And just a note to David Waldrop, I will do the H.G. Wells. I will do that, and I've got a couple other things to add to that as well. I will do those, but on a separate video, either today or tomorrow, depending on how much time I have. Anyway, I will see you later, BookTube. Thank you. Bye.